When you start writing and publishing for children, one of the hardest things to get right is, what age range are you writing for? Even prominent writers find this a sticky wicket. So, why do we need to know? What is the purpose of knowing your age range? Hey there, Space Cats! What issue does it solve to know your age range and your audience? And where do you start if you want to make that decision? Think about it from a buyer's perspective. Yes, as a creative person, you're going to need to know a bit of business too. Imagine that you are a grandma or a grandpa and you want to buy a book on dinosaurs for your grandson. So you go into Waterstones or Barnes & Noble and you head towards the children's section. You found the dinosaur section, but there's board books, there are picture books, there are chapter books, and there are even dystopian young adult novels about dinosaurs taking over the world. How do you know which book you need to buy? Where on earth do you start? Age range. It really is an important part of marketing. Yes, it's not just a dirty word. It's how to find your perfect customer and reader. If you're making picture books, you'll need to understand how this works because, arguably, this is the most critical stage of reading. Picture books bridge that gap between not being able to read and reading. Board books and picture books are incredibly important to children, and that potential time that they have sitting and reading with another person. It can have a direct effect on their ability to read and their enjoyment of books for the rest of their lives. Let's take a quick look at how children learn to read and their pre-reading behaviours, which include the awareness of printed words on packets, on signs, and in printed materials like books. Sound games like I Spy or tongue twisters. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Listening to like-minded sounds. Wally is wearing wellies. Wah. Awareness of rhyme. That's why nursery rhymes are so popular for children. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. And a concept of the printed word. How to look at a book the right way up, how to turn the pages, and which side of the page to start reading from. In the West, it's left to right. All of these things will come naturally to a parent or a grandparent who's reading to a child. It's not like a list that they need to work their way through. Have I done rhyming sounds today? Have I ticked off left to right reading? No, it all just comes naturally and unrehearsed. You might be wondering from the inside of a writer's mind, why do I have to pander for a particular age group? You might be thinking, but I'm an artist. I have to let out my inner self. Well, that's fine if you're making a book for yourself. But if you're making books because you want children to read them and you want people to buy them, maybe you feel that you have an important story or message to get out there, then you know what is best and what is expected for each age range. Here are the first few. Board and cloth books are mostly pictures. For example, it may be an A to Z of animals, or perhaps an 8-page book on vehicles. You might start with a very simple picture of a yacht with the word boat underneath it. At this stage, you are not expecting children to learn the word boat. What they will do is learn that a picture is a picture, and underneath that squiggly thing is a word. They will learn which way up to look at it and how to turn the pages. At this stage, they probably won't even understand that the picture is something that we recognise as a boat. Learning to perceive pictures and symbols is another aspect of learning to read. Picture books. Most picture books have 32 pages. That is deemed to be the right sort of length for a child of that age. That's the 3 to 6s. Some of those pages are taken up with the housekeeping, like the title page, copyright pages and end pages. Most of the story will take place over 24 pages, give or take a few. Picture books usually have around 500 words and no more than 1,000. That seems like an amazingly small amount. And it's often why when you hear well-known children's authors talking about children's writing being really hard. Every word has to earn its place in the book, and there's no place for extraneous nonsense. Remember, these are picture books. The pictures are really, really important. It's a key ingredient of the child learning to read. They read the pictures to learn what is going on in the text that they are hearing. The reader is saying out loud what the child can see on the page, but illustrators will often put in some other details that is not in the text. For example, if Teddy is having supper in the illustration, you might see what it is he's having for supper. Maybe it's something a bit naughty, like a packet of crisps or scones and jam. As they get older, they will learn the story off by heart, particularly if it is their favourite story. And they will start to put their finger underneath the words and pretend that they are reading it. Now, believe me when I say, if it is their favourite story and you try and skip a bit to leave it out so that you can nip downstairs for a glass of wine a little bit earlier, they will know. Their little ears are way too savvy. The vocabulary is really important here too. Use words that they will understand. For example, if you've written a story about the love between a parent and a child, Daddy said, "I find you so endearing." And they won't understand that. What they understand is, Daddy said, "I love you." Keep your vocab simple, but you can be challenging. Children like to learn new words and made up words. Limit your amount of characters too. If you've got 20 friends actively taking part in the narrative, it's very difficult to keep track of them all and who said what. I usually have one main character and then maybe a couple of supporting characters in supporting roles, and maybe then just some bystanders who happen to be there as part of the furniture, if you like. Next up, the 5 to 7-year-olds, which we call early readers. These are children who can be quite markedly different in their abilities. Perhaps some 5 to 7-year-olds are yomping through these books and making it seem very easy, whereas others, maybe they're struggling a little bit with the beginnings of their reading. You'll still expect to see a lot of pictures in the book to help nudge the connection between the visual story and the words. The plot and the characters will be a bit more developed than with picture books, and the word count is anywhere between 500 and 2,500 words. When my sons were learning to read, they worked their way through the Biff and Chip books that are published by Oxford Owl. They start simply and repetitively just to get you into that swing of learning the different sounds and letter shapes and word formations. And it's really important that they read to you every single day. And sometimes that can cause tantrums and meltdowns, and that's just from the adults. But it's incredibly important that they do this. Chapter books tell the story primarily through prose rather than pictures. And it's divided into chapters to keep the attention span, but also to give some breaks between things that happen in the story. At the moment though, there is a trend for more heavily image-led chapter books, so keep that in mind. The plot will be more involved because you have more space to unravel it. Think of something like the Roald Dahl books. They are very good examples of chapter books for this age range. It's really important to decide what age you are writing for before you even pick up your pen or make your first letter on your computer screen. But realistically, most indie writers actually start with writing something first and then deciding who it's written for. Sometimes you find that you might have written something that is way too complicated or too wordy for the age range that you really ought to be fitting into. So there might be a bit of editing that you need to do. But take heart, we've all been there. If you want a quick reminder of the things that we've talked about today, or look at middle grade or young adult novels, then I've got a really useful PDF and I'll leave the link in the description box below. That's it for now. Next week I will be looking at Dick Whittington, the story, not the pantomime. I'm off to fingerprint my dogs to find out who stole my biscuits. I will see you next week. Nanu nanu.